At that Thanksgiving dinner party, my father stood amidst the elegant guests, holding a glass of sparkling red wine under the crystal chandelier, and declared me a useless, talentless, penniless wretch with a teaching job. Then he laughed loudly, his voice echoing throughout the vast mansion, announcing that he was leaving all the shares of the corporation to David, my older brother, and the real estate properties and yacht to Anita, my youngest sister. I said nothing, just calmly stood up from my chair, walked over to him, and placed a stack of papers in his hand, DNA evidence, secretly taken photos, and a USB containing recordings of secret meetings. And then, the entire party turned into hell. Whispers turned into screams. My father's face turned as pale as a sheet of paper, and the world of the Banner family collapsed in the blink of an eye. My name is Oscar Banner, and if you think this is a story about revenge, it's not entirely. This is a story about the cracks in a family that have long been covered up by money and power. I'm not a hero, nor a villain. I'm just the middle child, the one always standing outside the warm circle of family affection, and ultimately the one who pulled down the curtain. But to understand why I did it, we have to go back in time, to the early days when I realized I didn't belong here. I was born in Philadelphia, the city of glittering skyscrapers and historic streets bearing the marks of history. The Banner family is part of the elite here, not the nouveau riche type, but a lineage of power stretching across generations. My father, Peter Banner, is the tycoon of Banner Heritage Holdings, a massive corporation specializing in real estate and finance. He built it from scratch with his own 2 hands, or at least that's what he always says in his speeches. But the truth is he inherited part of it from my grandfather, and the rest came from shrewd deals, sometimes ruthless ones. My father is tall, with silver hair, a deep and authoritative voice. He's the kind of person who, when he enters a room, everyone automatically falls silent. Successful, powerful, but selfish to the point where I sometimes wonder if he even has a heart. To him, everything is about benefits. A marriage, a child, even a smile, all must bring value. From a young age, I felt that distance. Our home was a sprawling mansion along the Schuylkill River with lush green gardens and an outdoor swimming pool. Wealth surrounded me like a shiny shell, but inside I always felt like an outsider. David, my older brother, 3 years my senior, was my father's ideal child. He was great at flattery, always knowing what to say to please Dad. "Dad, I think your idea is brilliant." Things like that. And Dad doted on him endlessly. David was taken on trips to Europe from the age of 10. Attended the most expensive private schools, and later was brought into the company to prepare for inheritance. And me? I was the middle child, straightforward to the point of foolishness. I didn't like flattery, didn't like power games. I liked reading books, thinking about the world beyond financial figures. And Anita, my youngest sister, 5 years younger than me, was the gentle, obedient little girl. She was like a doll in the house, always smiling and never arguing back. Dad loved her, but in his own way. Like a piece of jewelry, not a person with her own emotions. My mother, Renee Banner, was an elegant and reserved woman. She always appeared in expensive dresses, her hair neatly pinned up and a perfect smile on her lips. In Philadelphia's high society, she was the ideal wife, organizing parties, doing charity work, and keeping our family always polished. But the truth is, my mother clearly favored David and Anita. With David, she always praised him, stroking his hair as if he were a treasure. With Anita, she was gentle, hugging her. And with me, she was soft, but cold. She never protected me when Dad yelled. Instead, she would say things like, "Oscar, you should learn from your brother David," or just look at me silently with distant eyes. I always felt she was hiding something, earth-shattering secrets like a storm brewing in a layer of clouds. Let me tell you a childhood memory so you can understand better. When I was 8 years old, I entered a citywide piano competition. I practiced for months, my fingers calloused from pounding the keys. On the day of the competition, I played Beethoven's sonata perfectly and I won first place. The prize was a sparkling silver trophy, and I eagerly awaited my parents to come watch. But Dad didn't come. He was busy watching David play soccer in a youth league. David was only a substitute, didn't even score, but Dad was there clapping and cheering. Mom stayed home without a word of encouragement. When I came home with the trophy, Dad glanced at it and said, "Yeah, nice, but what good is piano? David is the future of the family." Mom just smiled, stroking David, who was sitting beside her, and said, "My boy is so talented, such great soccer." I stood there holding the trophy, feeling like my heart was being squeezed. From that moment, I knew I was a stranger in my own home. Wealth? It only made the pain more bitter. Those childhood years passed in that injustice. I was good at school, but Dad always compared me to David. "David's the one with the business mind," he said. I tried to get close to Mom, but she always kept her distance. Once I saw her sitting alone in the living room holding an old photo, her eyes red. I asked, "Mom, what's wrong?" She startled, quickly put away the photo and forced a smile. "Nothing, my dear. Go to bed." That photo, I glimpsed a strange man in it, but I was too young to understand then. I just knew that she was hiding something and it was causing her pain. As I entered my teenage years, everything became even clearer, like the cracks on the mansion's walls gradually spreading wider. I tried to find my place in the family, but every time I did, I was pushed to the sidelines. Dad started talking about the future, about who would inherit Banner Heritage Holdings. He looked at David with proud eyes, as if he were the perfect version of himself, tall, smooth in communication, and always knowing how to please everyone. "David, you'll be the one to lead this corporation," Dad would often say during dinner, his voice echoing over the silver plates and crystal glasses. "And me?" He just glanced over, shaking his head. "Oscar, you should think about studying properly. Don't indulge in fanciful dreams." I felt like I'd been stabbed, but I swallowed my bitterness, trying to prove myself. I decided to study far away, leaving Philadelphia for Harvard. That was my choice, not because Dad forced me, but because I needed space to breathe. There, under the ancient tree canopies and in lecture halls filled with books, I found freedom. I studied economics not to become a businessman like Dad, but to understand how the world works, the social injustices, the financial risks, and ways to make things fairer. Those years I matured, becoming an independent man. After graduating, I chose to become an economics lecturer at a small university in Boston. The salary wasn't high. Life was simple with a rented apartment and black coffee mornings, but I was happy. I taught students about investment diversification, about financial transparency, things I believed could change the world. And most importantly, I had nothing to do with the family company. Banner Heritage Holdings? That was Dad and David's empire, not mine. Meanwhile, David was brought into the company by Dad immediately after graduating from college. He started as an assistant, but everyone knew it was just for show. Dad trained him like a loyal hunting dog, teaching him how to negotiate, how to sign contracts, how to skirt the law to maximize profits. "David is the future," Dad boasted to partners in meetings. I heard the news through Anita, my sister, who kept in touch regularly. Anita, that gentle little girl, had now grown into a soft-spoken young woman studying art at a boarding school. She adored me, often calling late at night to chat. "Brother Oscar, I miss you. Dad keeps praising David all the time," she said, her voice tinged with sadness. But she didn't dare oppose Dad. Anita always stood silently in the middle, like a ghost in the house, loving me but fearing Dad to the point of not daring to speak up in my defense. Every time I came home to visit, the atmosphere was tense like a string about to snap. The mansion was the same, vast and cold, with expensive paintings on the walls and the faint scent of perfume from Mom's room. I tried to offer suggestions about the company because I still cared, even if I didn't want to admit it. "Dad, the corporation should diversify its investments," I said during a family dinner. "Real estate is saturated. We should shift to green technology and be more transparent, publicly disclose financial reports to avoid legal risks." Dad looked at me. his eyes flashing with contempt. "What do you know, Oscar? You're just a penniless lecturer, good only at empty theories with no real-world experience. David is the one who gets things done." He ignored me, turning to David. "What do you think, David?" David glanced at me, smirking, then replied to Dad. "I think the old way is still better." Dad nodded in agreement. I sat there, blood rushing to my face, feeling like I'd been slapped. Not just once, but many times like that. Dad openly mocked me in front of everyone as if it were his favorite joke. Once at a party celebrating a big contract with partners, Dad pulled me out to introduce me. "This is Oscar, my middle son. He chose teaching, living in poverty but every happy." Everyone burst into laughter, fake chuckles echoing through the banquet hall. The partners patted my shoulder sympathetically. "Hang in there, young man, it's okay." I stood there, gripping my wine glass tightly, humiliated to the point of wanting to disappear. Relatives whispered behind my back, "Poor Oscar, not as good as his brother." And Mom, she never defended me. She sat there, smiling politely, then turned to praise David. "My David is so talented, signing such a big contract like this." I gradually realized that Mom wasn't just silent. She was deliberately belittling me. She elevated every contribution of David's, as if trying to push me out of the picture. "Oscar, you should learn from your brother," she said to me privately, her voice soft but cold. I started wondering why Mom acted that way. Did she not truly love me, or was she hiding some secret? I didn't know the answer then. I only knew that Mom's behavior was eroding my heart from the inside. In those years, Anita was my only support. She would often sneak me out to the garden under the old oak tree and whisper, "Brother Oscar, I know you're right." But Dad would be so angry if I said it out loud. I hugged her, feeling a rare warmth in this house. But even Anita couldn't fill the void. The father-son gap grew wider like a bottomless abyss. Dad saw me as useless, Mom treated me like a stranger. David was always the winner and I was always the outsider. I started coming home less often, using work to fill the pain. But deep down, I knew a storm was coming. And then, on a rainy afternoon in Philadelphia, everything changed. As I returned home for a visit after several months busy with lectures and research in Boston, the rain was pouring down heavily, the droplets pattering against the car roof like urgent drumbeats. I didn't want to stay long at the mansion. That stifling atmosphere made me feel suffocated, so I decided to take a stroll through the old streets, seeking a bit of peace. I stopped at a small coffee shop in the historic district, the place where I used to sit and read books during high school. The shop was the same as ever, the aroma of freshly ground coffee mingling with the scent of old books, warm golden light shining through the fogged-up window panes. I settled into a corner, ordered a black coffee with no sugar, and absent-mindedly gazed out the window, where people hurried by under the rain. But then, my eyes came to rest on a secluded corner at the back of the shop. There, my mother and David were sitting. They didn't notice me as I was hidden behind a tall wooden bookshelf. My heart pounded. What were they doing here so secretly? Not at home or in some fancy restaurant like usual? And then a man walked in, shaking off his wet umbrella, and sat down with them. He was around my father's age, about 60, with salt and pepper hair neatly trimmed, exuding the seasoned demeanor of a businessman who had weathered many storms. His face was angular, with a sly half-smile full of cunning. They began talking, their voices in whispers, heads bowed close together. I held my breath, straining to listen over the sound of the rain and the coffee grinder. I couldn't catch everything, but it was enough to know this wasn't an ordinary social meeting. My mother looked at him with eyes that were intimate, strangely warm, not the artificial politeness she usually reserved for my father's business partners. No, this was the gaze of a woman reminiscing about old memories filled with affection and a touch of regret. She placed her hand on his for a second, then quickly withdrew it as if afraid someone might see. David smiled and called him Jack. I heard it crystal clear. Jack? A completely unfamiliar name. I'd never heard my mother or David mention it. And then, when he turned his face, I was startled. David looked so much like him. The straight, high nose, that half smile, even the way he raised his eyebrows when speaking. From childhood, I'd noticed that David didn't resemble my father at all. Dad had a square face with sharp, piercing eyes. My heart raced wildly, a chilling sensation running down my spine. What was this? A meeting with an old friend? Or something darker? I sat there, my hand trembling as I held the coffee cup, pretending to read a book but keeping my eyes fixed on them. They talked for about half an hour, then stood up and left separately. Mom and David first, Jack a few minutes later. I waited a bit longer, then slipped out, following from a distance. They didn't meet up again, but my mind was swirling with suspicions. Why were they meeting in secret? Why did Mom look at him that way? And why did David resemble him so much? Blood ties. The thought flashed like lightning, leaving me dazed. It couldn't be. Mom wasn't the type to have an affair. But then old memories flooded back. The strange photo she hid, the time she silently looked at David with eyes full of secrets, and the way she always pushed me away. Could it be that David wasn't Dad's biological son? The idea made me nauseous, but I couldn't dismiss it. I needed to find out. And that was when I decided to dig deeper, no matter how painful it might be. I couldn't follow them myself. I was a lecturer, not a detective, and if I got caught, everything would fall apart. But that coffee shop, there was a girl there. Nancy, the young waitress with brown hair tied in a ponytail, a bright smile and sharp eyes. She was about 25, always chatting with customers like old friends. I struck up a conversation with her. Nancy said she had studied journalism at the local university but dropped out because life got tough. And now she was waitressing to support her sibling. I like observing people, she said, her eyes sparkling. Like a living news story. That's why I thought of her. Someone who knew how to take notes, listen without drawing attention. The next day I returned to the shop, my heart pounding like a criminal's. The place was quiet, with only a few customers scrolling on their phones. I sat in my usual corner, ordered coffee, and when Nancy brought it over, I whispered, "Nancy, can you help me? This is serious." She raised an eyebrow, sat down across from me, wiping her hands on her apron. I told her briefly about my mother and David meeting the strange man, about my suspicions. I didn't go into family details, just enough for her to understand. "Can you keep an eye on them for me? If they come back here, note down what they say, take photos if possible. I'll pay you a lot." Nancy was silent for a moment, her eyes scrutinizing me. "Mr. Oscar, I'm not a detective, but I studied journalism. I know how to observe. If it's a family matter, I'll help." I nodded, gave her my phone number and an advance payment. My heart felt a bit lighter, but the worry still weighed heavily. If I was wrong, I'd destroy everything. 2 weeks passed in suspense. I was in Boston, teaching with my mind elsewhere, lying awake at night. Then a message from Nancy arrived. "They're back. Meeting this afternoon. I'm watching." My heart leaped. She sent the first photo. Mom, David, and Jack sitting in the usual corner, heads close together. Then detailed messages. I'm at a nearby table, pretending to take orders. They're addressing each other strangely. David calls him Dad. He calls David son, and your mom. She calls him darling, in a whisper full of affection. I read it with trembling hands. Dad, son, darling? That wasn't a friendship, that was family and lovers. My suspicions were true. David wasn't my father's son, Jack was his real father. I slumped into my chair, my mind reeling. But Nancy wasn't done. A few days later, another message. They met again. This time, big talk. I recorded a segment with my phone hidden in my pocket. She sent the audio file, whispers through the cafe noise. I listened over and over, my ears ringing from the shock. Jack said, "After Peter finalizes the will, we have to act. Take him out before he changes his mind." Mom whispered, "I don't want this, darling." "But for David," David interjected. "Dad, I'll handle the rest. The corporation will be ours." Oh God, were they plotting to kill my father? I listened as my blood ran cold. Not just an affair, but they wanted revenge. I imagined the scene, my father, the powerful but blind man, being killed by his own wife and son. Pain mixed with anger. Why? Who was Jack? I needed stronger evidence. And so I began investigating deeper, sneaking around like a ghost in my own family. I returned to the mansion under the pretext of visiting Anita, but really to gather evidence. That vast house now felt like a maze full of secrets, every corner making me shudder. I smiled and chatted normally with everyone, but my heart pounded every time I looked at Mom and David. They still played the perfect family. Mom gently brewing tea, David telling stories about the company, unaware that I was watching them. On the first night, I lay awake, listening to the wind howling through the window like a warning. The next morning, when the whole family was busy, I sneaked into the main bathroom, the one Dad and David often used. My heart beat like a drum as I opened the cabinet, seeing an old comb with a few silver hairs from Dad and black hairs from David mixed together. Trembling, I picked up a few strands, put them into a small plastic bag, feeling like a thief in my own home. "What are you doing, Oscar?" I asked myself, cold sweat breaking out. But I didn't stop. I sent the hair samples to a DNA lab in Boston, using a fake name and temporary address, paying double for quick results. The waiting days were hell. I stood on the podium with my mind in the clouds, answering students' questions perfunctorily. While waiting, I dug deeper into Jack. I used the computer at the school library, avoiding leaving traces at home. Searching online, I discovered Jack Harlan, his full name thanks to the photos and descriptions Nancy sent. He was once a businessman in the finance industry, a rival of my father's in his youth. Jack's company went bankrupt 20 years ago, after a scandal that my father was involved in. Dad used underhanded tactics to eliminate Jack from the game, buying his assets for dirt cheap. Old newspapers called it the brutal war between two Philly tycoons. Jack lost everything, then disappeared without a trace from high society. He had been living in hiding all this time. And now, was he back for revenge? Everything started to connect. Had my mother been in love with Jack all these decades? Were they planning revenge? And was David the result of the affair between my mother and Jack? I sat in the dimly lit library, the computer screen illuminating my face, feeling like I was opening Pandora's box. Anger towards Mom and David mixed with pity for Dad. How blind must he be not to notice? Then the DNA results arrived in a discreet envelope sent to my office. I opened it with shaking hands, my heart pounding as if it would burst. The report was clear. Sample A, Peter Banner, and Sample B, David Banner, have no paternal blood relation. Accuracy 99%. I read it over and over, my eyes blurring with tears. David wasn't my full brother, but only a half-brother from the same mother but different father. Mom had deceived Dad for all these years. I slumped to the floor, hugging my knees, both pained and shocked. Pained by the family breaking apart, shocked by the harsh truth. I thought about the times Dad favored David, mocked me. Turns out he was pampering a bastard child, and me, his real flesh and blood son, pushed to the sidelines. Tears rolled down, but then I wiped them away, stood up. I couldn't be weak. I needed to gather more evidence, photos, recordings from Nancy, documents about Jack. I locked the report in the safe, deciding to continue quietly. The storm was coming and I had to be ready. In the days that followed, the atmosphere in the Banner mansion was like a ticking time bomb, building up energy waiting to explode. My father, Peter Banner, decided to host the grandest Thanksgiving party ever, a lavish gala at the Riverside Mansion, inviting all of Philadelphia's elite, politicians, business partners, distant relatives, even a few TV stars. He called it a gratitude gathering, but I knew better. This was his way of flaunting his power, solidifying his status before announcing his will. "This year has to be spectacular, Renee," he said to Mom over breakfast, his voice excited like a child's. David will be the center. He deserves it. Mom smiled, nodding, but I saw her eyes averting as if hiding worry. David grinned broadly, patting Dad on the shoulder. I'll make you proud, Dad. And me? I sat there, swallowing a bite of toast with difficulty, feeling like an outsider at my own family meal. I felt a terrible unease, like a stone weighing heavily on my chest. Every night I lay awake reviewing the evidence, the DNA report, the photos Nancy sent, Mom and Jack embracing in the coffee shop, David calling him Dad with a voice full of respect. The documents about Jack were like a dark novel. He had once had his career destroyed by my father, and now he was back for revenge through Mom and David. The plot to eliminate Dad after the will. The thought chilled me to the bone. I wanted to scream, to run and hug Dad and tell him everything, but I couldn't. Dad wouldn't believe me. He always saw me as useless, would think I was jealous of David. No, I had to wait for the right moment, expose it in front of a crowd so no one could deny it. I prepared meticulously, printed the DNA report, copied the recordings onto a USB, even consulted a lawyer privately to ensure the evidence was legal. My heart pounded every time I thought about the party. It would be hell, but necessary. Nancy became an unexpected ally. I called her to the mansion under the pretext of helping with party setup, a perfect role for the young waitress. Mr. Oscar, I'm scared, she whispered when we met alone in the garden, under the old oak tree where Anita had once comforted me. I held her hand, feeling a strange warmth amid the storm in my heart. You've already helped me so much. Just be there. Hand over the USB recording if needed. I'll handle the rest. Nancy nodded, her eyes sparkling with determination. She had studied journalism, and now it was like she was living in a real investigative story. On that Thanksgiving party day, the atmosphere was lively, but I felt tense like a string about to snap. The mansion was decorated magnificently, crystal chandeliers sparkling under the soft glow of scented candles, a long banquet table covered in pristine white linen stretching across the grand hall, with platters of golden roasted turkey smelling delicious, fresh salads, crispy toasted bread, and bottles of red wine swirling in delicate crystal glasses. Laughter and chatter echoed everywhere. The guests, stately senators in shiny suits, business partners with perfect social smiles, distant relatives whispering about the Banner family's wealth, crowded together, raising glasses and toasts. The scent of white lilies mingled with the aroma of grilled meat, creating a picture of perfect luxury. But to me, it was all just a facade, covering the deep cracks beneath. Nancy had arrived early, dressed in a neat black and white server uniform, weaving through the crowd with a tray of drinks in hand. No one could suspect she was anything but an ordinary event staff member. I saw her smile at me from afar, a discreet smile full of encouragement, and it helped me feel more confident having an ally by my side, someone who knew the truth, someone on my side amid this sea of strangers. I stood in the corner of the hall, gripping my wine glass tightly but not taking a sip, my eyes scanning the crowd. My father, Peter Banner, was the center of all attention. He was tall, his silver hair neatly combed, wearing an expensive gray suit, laughing heartily and patting people on the shoulders like a king bestowing favors. "Thank you all for joining the celebration," he boomed, his deep voice echoing through the speakers. My mother, Renee, stood beside him, stunning in a floor-length wine-red gown, a perfect smile on her lips, but I saw her hands clutching the napkin tightly as if trying to suppress her anxiety. David was radiant, moving among the guests like a star, shaking hands, chatting, and receiving praises about being the future heir of Banner Heritage Holdings. Anita sat beside me in a gentle pink dress, whispering, "Brother Oscar, are you okay? You look so tense." I forced a smile, stroking her hair. "I'm fine, it's just the party is too crowded." But inside, I was counting down. The pocket of my suit jacket felt heavy with the DNA report, the USB recording, and the hastily printed photos. The formal dinner began when everyone sat down. The clinking of cutlery, the lively chatter, but I ate without tasting anything. Dad sat at the head of the table like a lord, and after the main course, he stood up, tapping his wine glass to draw attention. The entire hall fell silent, all eyes on him. "Dear friends," he began, his voice grand. "Today, Thanksgiving is a time to give thanks for the good things. For me, that's my family and the empire I've built, Banner Heritage Holdings. And I'm proud to introduce the most worthy successor, my son, David Banner." The guests applauded thunderously. David stood up, bowing modestly, but his eyes sparkled with triumph. Dad continued, "David has proven himself intelligent, decisive, and loyal. He'll take the corporation to new heights." Mom clapped, looking at David with eyes full of feigned affection, while Anita smiled, though I saw her glance at me with worry. Then the climax arrived. Dad held up a sheet of paper, the will he had finalized, and read it aloud to the crowd. "I, Peter Banner, declare all shares of Banner Heritage Holdings Corporation will belong to David Banner. The real estate properties, including this mansion and the resorts, along with the yacht Heritage, will belong to Anita Banner." The guests gasped in admiration, applauding enthusiastically. And me? Not a single mention. I sat there, my heart pounding, but my face remained calm. Dad looked at me, his smile twisted, and then he said, in front of everyone, "And Oscar, my middle son, ha, he chose the penniless teaching profession, a useless, talentless wretch. Oh well, life needs losers to highlight the winners." The entire hall burst into laughter, fake chuckles echoing like knives cutting into my heart. Relatives whispered, partners patted Dad's shoulder in agreement. Mom said nothing, just bowed her head while David laughed loudly, clapping. Anita gripped my hand under the table, her eyes teary. "Brother, don't mind it." Humiliation surged, but I didn't react. Not yet. I took a deep breath, stood up slowly, the screech of the chair cutting through the laughter. The hall fell silent, all eyes on me. Dad raised an eyebrow. "What, Oscar? You have something to say? Or are you going to lecture on theoretical economics?" The guests chuckled. I walked over to him, my voice calm but resounding. "Yes, Dad. I have something to say. And not just say. I have proof." I pulled out the stack of papers from my pocket, the DNA report first, and placed it in his hand. "This is the DNA test result. David is not your biological son." The hall went dead silent, whispers beginning. Dad looked at the paper, his face turning pale. "What? Are you crazy?" I continued, my voice louder. "Mom never loved you. She loves Jack Harlan, your old rival, the one you once destroyed. And David, your pride, is Jack's son." I presented the photos, Mom and Jack holding hands in the coffee shop, David conversing intimately with him. The guests started murmuring, someone whispering, "Oh my God." Mom stood up abruptly, her face ashen. "Oscar, you're lying." But I didn't stop. I held up the USB. "And this is the recording. They're plotting to eliminate you after the will is finalized, so David can quickly take over the corporation legally. Through the will you just announced." I plugged the USB into the projector that had been prepared. Nancy had secretly helped me earlier, and played the recording. Jack's voice rang out. "After Peter finalizes the will, we have to act. Take him out." Mom's voice. "Darling, we can be together again like old times." David's voice agreeing. "Dad, I'll handle dealing with him." Chaos erupted. The guests were stunned. Someone shouted, "Call the police." A senator stood up, face flushed. "This is a scandal," relatives whispered in horror. Partners shook their heads and left. Dad slumped into his chair, clutching his chest, his face pale as paper, looking at Mom and David with eyes full of pain and fury. Mom cried, covering her face. "Peter, David stammered. "Dad, it's not like that." But the truth was exposed, undeniable. I stood there, my heart pounding, but feeling a mix of relief and pain. The party turned into hell, and I, the outsider, had pulled down the curtain. In the aftermath, my father, Peter Banner, slumped into his chair like a felled stone statue, his hand still clutching his chest, his face so pale it looked like he was about to faint. The crystal chandelier lights still sparkled overhead, but now they illuminated a scene of chaos. Guests whispering in uproar, some standing up and leaving hurriedly, phones being pulled out to secretly record or call someone. The elderly senator's face flushed red, shaking his head. A scandal like this. The Banners are finished. Business partners averted their eyes, murmuring to each other about canceling contracts. Relatives, those distant relatives Dad always bragged about, looked at us with horrified eyes as if the Banner family had just been cursed. My mother, Renee, stood there trembling, her wine-red gown now looking like spilled blood, her hand covering her mouth to stifle sobs. David's face was drained of color, stammering, "Dad, it's not like that, But Dad didn't look at him. He turned to Mom, his voice hoarse, filled with pain and fury. "Renee, speak! Is this true?" The entire hall fell silent, as if everyone was holding their breath, waiting for a tragic play to end. Mom looked at Dad, tears streaming down her cheeks, smudging her perfect makeup. She tried to stand tall, but her voice trembled. "Peter, I'm sorry." Dad slammed the table, the sound echoing like thunder. "Sorry? Speak. Is David my son or not? Jack Harlan, the bastard I once trampled into the mud, is he his father?" The guests whispered louder. Someone shouted, "Call the police." But Dad waved his hand, his eyes red. "No. Let her speak." Under that pressure, Mom collapsed, kneeling by his chair, her voice breaking. "Yes, David is Jack's son. Jack, he was once your rival and you destroyed him, buying his company for pennies, pushing him into bankruptcy. Jack hates you to the bone. He used me, convinced me to marry you for revenge. It was a long-term plan. I bore his child and raised him to be the heir to steal everything from you." That confession was like another bomb exploding. Guests cried out. One female relative fainted and had to be helped out. David tried to interject. "Mom, don't!" But Dad whipped around to him, eyes blazing. You knew everything, didn't you? Your dad is Jack and you plotted to kill me?" David bowed his head, his voice mumbling. I just wanted justice for my real father." Dad sneered, a bitter laugh. "Justice? You're a bastard child." Then he turned back to Mom, his voice softer but full of pain. "And Oscar? Anita? Are they mine? Or did you deceive me about everything, turning me into a fool?" Mom lifted her head, tears flooding. "No, Peter. Only David. Oscar and Anita are your biological children, but I'm sorry. I never loved you, Peter. Never. I tried. But this marriage was just Jack's tool for revenge. I could never forget him." Those words stabbed Dad's heart like a knife. He sat there, clutching his chest tighter, breathing heavily. "Never loved. I gave you everything, the mansion, jewelry, status, and you deceived me for 30 years? Mom sobbed uncontrollably. "I'm sorry. Jack promised to take me away after everything was over." Dad looked at her, his eyes shifting from anger to despair like a man who had just lost everything. His honor, the tycoon of Philadelphia's power, was tarnished in front of the entire elite. The senators who once groveled before him now avoided him. Partners whispered about pulling investments. The family was shaken, the company's reputation teetering like a tree in the wind. I could imagine Banner Heritage Holdings stocks plummeting in the morning, newspapers blaring, "Adultery and murder plot scandal in billionaire family." I stood there watching the scene of destruction, my heart aching. Anita ran to me, hugging tightly, crying, "Brother Oscar, how did it come to this?" Nancy sneaked closer, whispering, "Are you okay?" I comforted my sister, thanked Nancy, then stepped toward Dad. He looked at me, his eyes clouded with rare tears. "Oscar, you." I knelt beside him, my voice calm but full of emotion. "Dad, I don't want the assets. I never did. I just wanted the truth to be acknowledged. That I'm your son, that I've tried, and that this family isn't just about money. Dad looked at me for the first time in years without contempt. He placed his hand on my shoulder, his voice weak. Son, I was wrong. But then he clutched his chest tighter, his face contorting in pain, and he collapsed back into the chair. A sudden heart attack, the consequence of the massive shock. A doctor guest rushed over, shouting to call an ambulance. The chaos intensified, and I stood there, having just saved Dad from the plot, yet pushing him into the abyss. Screams echoed throughout the hall, guests pushing and shoving each other toward the door as if the mansion were about to collapse. The ambulance siren wailed deafeningly outside the gate, flashes from the phones of curious onlookers flickering like hellish fireworks. Dad was lifted onto a stretcher, his face deathly pale, gasping for breath in fits, but he still gripped my hand tightly for a second before being wheeled into the vehicle. Oscar, don't go! I nodded, tears streaming down my face without me realizing. Then the ambulance sped off into the rainy Philadelphia night. Mom and David were detained by the police right on the spot, not an official arrest, but for investigating the murder plot. Mom sobbed uncontrollably, her red dress wrinkled and disheveled, while David hung his head low, not daring to look at anyone. Mom whispered to me before leaving, Son, I'm sorry. But I turned away, my heart aching like it was being torn apart. She had never been a real mother to me. The next morning, the news spread like wildfire. Philadelphia newspapers blared the headlines. Shocking scandal rocks the Banner family. Adultery, murder plot, and a shattered will. Banner Heritage Holdings stocks plummeted disastrously. Partners withdrew investments en masse. Relatives distanced themselves like avoiding a plague. Our family, once a symbol of power, had become a laughingstock for the world. Anita was devastated beyond words. She cried all night, hugging her pillow in her room, whispering, Why did Mom and David do that? I love them. I sat beside her, stroking her back to comfort her. The truth sometimes hurts, but it makes us stronger. They chose the wrong path. Gradually, Anita came to understand, through long conversations, through the evidence I showed her. She was still sad, but she began looking at me with eyes full of respect. Brother Oscar, you're my pillar now. We hugged each other, two siblings adrift amid the ruins of our family. Dad was hospitalized for 2 weeks. The heart attack was mild, but enough to leave him exhausted. When he woke up, he tried to hold on to me, calling constantly, his voice weak through the oxygen tube. Oscar, come back, son. Dad needs you. The corporation, I'll revise the will. But I kept my distance, visiting him only a few times, sitting by his hospital bed with a heavy heart. Dad, I don't need the assets, I said, my voice calm. I just want you to acknowledge me as a son, not as someone useless. He looked at me, his eyes red. I was blind. You're my real son. You're talented in your own way. Those words came late, but they soothed some of the pain that had built up over the years. I forgave him, but I didn't return. I chose my own life, with lectures in Boston, with the truth finally set free. I didn't seize Banner Heritage Holdings, even though Dad now saw me as the legitimate heir. Son, come back. I'll hand everything over to you, he said during my last hospital visit, his voice weak through the hospital glass, machines beeping around him like reminders of life's fragility. But I shook my head, smiling sadly. Dad, I don't need it. Let the company be for you to handle. I just want to live my own way. He looked at me, his eyes clouded from the medication, and nodded. For the first time, he respected my choice. I kept the evidence, the DNA report, recordings, photos, as a shield for self-protection in case Mom or David came back with some scheme. But I didn't use them to fight for anything. They were the key to unlocking the suffocating prison of lies, and now I was free. Anita stayed with Dad, caring for him through his severe illness. She grew up quickly amid those ruins, learning to manage a small portion of the assets Dad entrusted to her. And we kept in touch regularly, long video calls, short visits. Brother Oscar, I'm proud of you, she said, her voice warm through the screen. As for Mom and David, They vanished from our lives, probably living in hiding somewhere with Jack under the shadow of the scandal. The press gradually forgot, but the scar remained, a reminder of the value of truth. And Nancy, she became a pleasant surprise in my life. After that hellish party, we met again at the old coffee shop, where it all began. "Mr. Oscar, I think you need a cup of black coffee, no sugar," she said, her smile sparkling as before. From fragmented conversations, we grew closer, strolling through Boston, sharing our life stories. She went back to studying journalism with a scholarship I secretly helped with, and became a companion, bringing a gentle hope for the future. It wasn't passionate love, but peace. Someone who understood me without judgment, someone who reminded me that life has many good things beyond gold, silver, and revenge. In the end, I stood on the mansion's balcony. The last time I visited, on another Thanksgiving night, fireworks exploding across the Philadelphia sky, illuminating the sparkling Schuylkill River. The wind was bitterly cold on my skin, but my heart felt strangely warm. I whispered to myself, to the night wind, "Some truths don't bring happiness, but at least they free us from lies." And then I turned my back and walked away. No longer an outsider, but a free man.